Hello, everyone. Again, this is our second episode of an Armenian-American perspective, as Martin corrected me last time. And today we have with us joining Robert Davidian. As I mentioned in our little teaser, we are all Armenian Americans, though representing three different factions. Robert Davidian is a second generation, meaning his grandparents had emigrated. Martin is a first generation, meaning his parents had. And I'm still considered an immigrant generation. I've been here for many years. So hopefully this will cover a wide range. We've also have different backgrounds. I grew up in New York. Robert, New York for the first part of his life, though he's been in California, if I'm not mistaken, over 30 years at this point. And Martin is a native of Watertown, Massachusetts, which is one of, if not the oldest center. I think it even predates Fresno, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Martin?
Well, the oldest would be Worcester, which is just west of us. But Watertown has had a pretty large Armenian presence for quite some time now, and I think after Glendale, probably Watertown is one of the most densely Armenian populated areas in the United States.
So the only purpose of that is to say that we've all had our experience with the Armenian community, as well as with the American community. And I think we represent the Armenian-American community fairly well. What I think we should discuss and what our listeners, or hopefully our listeners, would want to hear is how do we get out of this situation? I don't think we should beat around the bush. I think we should try to keep things as simple as possible, not overcomplicate them unnecessarily, because I think that's the job for politicians, which we are not. And also the job for the naysayers that say, oh, this is all too complicated, it takes time. And of course, it's not a simple matter, but I don't believe it's as complicated as it should be. And what can be done to make Armenia, our homeland, collectively, all of our homeland, a viable state? And what I mean by a viable state is that one where its citizens are not concerned with their safety, are not looking over their back for whether it's a thug or it's the government corruption coming after them. So that type of safety. And then, of course, to fulfill the basic needs, food, water, shelter, medical care that they can provide for themselves and their family. These are the most basic things in order for it to be a viable state. Armenia has not been a viable state for quite some time. Armenia as a state, meaning since the collapse of the Soviet Union, since 91 until now. And then, of course, in the last 3 years, since the war in 2020, we've seen matters get worse and worse. So with that, starting with Robert, the oldest generation Armenian American, what are your thoughts on what the diaspora, and in this case specifically the diaspora in the United States, what and how can we do anything to help the viability of the Armenian state?
For me, I think one of the main things that got me involved, really, I didn't know anything about Armenia when I was a teenager. And then I started working for video production for AGBU in Armenia. And so visiting Armenia, going to Armenia for any reason that you can, if you have family there or if you have some groups that are going there, go there as much as you can, because I went there 22 times so far, and get involved and meet people and find out. This is what I did. I found out what their lives were like, and how they were struggling with corruption and day-to-day life, food, shelter, and why. you know, and I didn't know much about that before. And so I think it's important for at least to become aware of what's going on there by seeing it yourself. And then once you do that, you can decide what areas you want to help with, civil society or with National Democratic Alliance, to spread the word of, you know, you don't have to be under this corrupt system. You have a constitution, and you can use that to your best advantage. But unfortunately, the courts are still packed with corrupt judges, corrupt system. We're talking about judges that are just asking for money for any kind of decision that they can make. So yeah, so all of this has to be exposed to more and more people in the United States, American Armenians, that will then in turn filter the word out and then go to Armenia and help.
And I know from our past conversations, Robert, that as an American Armenian, like you said, you knew very little. And of course, you knew you were Armenian, you knew about Armenia, but, correct me if I'm wrong, but you thought of it as some far off, exotic place of your ancestors, as opposed to a real place where your brethren live, not unlike someone in Glendale who thinks of Encino, or someone in Watertown that thinks of Brooklyn. It's important for that generation, I think, to realize that it's a real place. It's a real place that you probably have blood relatives, or at least brothers and sisters in the communal sense, that share your background, that share your culture. So it's a real place. It's not some historic ancient place that we go just to visit.
Right.
And you touched on, and maybe Martin can follow up on that. You touched on going there, visiting, and then seeing the problems and making it aware to people over here in the United States.
Right.
If Martin, you could follow up on that or add your own.
Well, since we're talking about our personal experiences, you know, I grew up in Watertown, born and raised here, and have always been active in Armenian community life. And you know, I worked in a number of Armenian institutions growing up, and then I had the opportunity to study in Armenia. And first time I went to Armenia was when Armenia was still a Soviet republic in 1989. And then I saw the transition from the Armenian Soviet Republic to what was, I guess, called an independent republic. Although, you know, we still don't have true independence even 30 years later. So, you know, that's an issue. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought. Don't know exactly where I was going with this.
Well, you were saying your introduction to yourself, your personal bio, and then as far as what we can bring to the Armenian community, or what should the Armenian-American community,
right? Yeah, and a lot of Armenian Americans have never been to Armenia, and they think of it as, you know, this far off place, which is what you were alluding to, Gokor, earlier. But no, it's a very real place, and I've been back a couple of times since I was a student there, and you know, this connection definitely needs to be further developed between the diaspora and Armenia, and unfortunately, you know, the government of Armenia needs to do something about this, and unfortunately, they're really not doing anything. At one point, we used to have a Ministry of Diaspora that was dissolved, and now it's really up to individuals in the diaspora, in various diaspora communities, to make that connection with Armenia. And I, being a political person myself, I found the message of the National Democratic Alliance something I can subscribe to and support, because they are actually doing something. They're doing something for the betterment of Armenia, for the betterment of the future of Armenia.
They're pushing democratic policies and democratic way of life, as opposed to this Soviet kind of former, all three previous presidents. And I cover these in my documentaries about the theft of not just money, but of human rights, of elections, and all of that is still happening.
And now the very dignity of the Armenian, by having a leader, of course I use that term loosely, a Pashinyan, who goes internationally and utters the words Western Azerbaijan, even though it's attributed to Aliyev, but just the fact that your commander-in-chief is uttering the words Western Azerbaijan, using the Azeri names for historic and legal Armenian regions. These were, for lack of a better word, kicking us while we're down. So not only has our rights been stolen, has our freedom been stolen, at this point, our dignity. And that is what they've been trying to do on these years' end, for us just to feel demoralized, beaten, and just throw our hands up in the air, which, as we remember, was his sign when he started the so-called Velvet Revolution. We were doing this instead of making a fist. And anybody, anywhere, any fifth grader knows that the sign for victory or struggle is this. It's never this. This is surrender. Anyway, without getting too philosophical, but what I wanted to also get at is to make Armenia a viable state. We hear different things. I think at this point, every Armenian with any kind of common sense or foresight has realized that we need to be stronger. Now, how do we be stronger? I think we've given up on the fact of Russia becoming a reliable ally. Even the most hardcore Russophiles at this point have given up. There was no region in Armenia that had a stronger Russo-centric feeling than Artsakh. And our brethren in Artsakh felt firsthand how betrayed, and they used the word betrayed, by Russia. Of course, betrayed implies that at some point they were allies and then they betrayed us. I think it's quite fair to say that they were never an ally. Actually, this year, 2024, I was going to say celebrates, marks 300 years that the Russians have specifically been against this. 1724 was when it first started the idea of Armenia without Armenians, which is what Tsarist Russia did, Bolshevik Russia did, and Putin's Russia continues to do. So if we're going to get stronger, and we know that Russia is not our ally, we know that in order to make ourselves stronger will take years, if not decades, then I think it's quite common sense that one of the ways to become stronger is to form strong, reliable allies that share mutual interests. And that is where the so-called West comes in, and in particular, the United States. So how do we form a stronger alliance with the US? I wanted to touch on lobbying. I know that's been talked about at all different levels. Armenia has never had lobbying in the United States. Armenia has had advocacy groups such as the Assembly and ANCA, of which 99.9% of their advocacy has been about genocide recognition, which is all well and good, but it has very little to do, if anything, with actual building statehood. Last time when Hamlet Sarkisian with us, he brought up the example of Israel, and don't worry, Martin, I won't dwell on it. But just to give the viewers an idea, Israel's lobbying is beyond strong in Washington. I was reading up, I didn't even know. One of their largest lobbying organizations has a revenue of, well, in donations, I guess, close to $100 million. And I could only find 2015 statistics. They have over 10 million members. So they are constantly, at every breath, at every intersection, doing something. And what have we done? Genocide recognition. When Colonel Sefilian was in Washington in last March, he mentioned several times that the meetings that he had with think tanks and congressmen and State Department officials, practically all of them without exception, were surprised to meet an Armenian that did not speak about genocide, rather spoke about statehood, spoke about advancing Armenian ties with the West, with the US. So they were pleasantly surprised, because when you talk about genocide, some of them, their hands were tied. But when you talk about forming alliances, when you talk about fighting the common enemy, which in this case is the Russian Federation, then their ears perk up and they see what they can do. And the National Democratic Alliance, as Robert said, and as Martin said, that he feels a need to associate himself with that, has been doing the job of what the Armenian government should have been doing, has been doing the job of what Armenian organizations should have been doing. It's been left to the National Democratic Alliance, but unfortunately, they don't have a $100 million budget, nor do they have millions of members. So it is up to us to get the word out, to explain how important lobbying is, which leads me to the next question that I think one of the issues that has separated us is that understanding how the American political system works and what lobbying means. And it's not only for statehood. And maybe, Robert, you can touch, because I know one of the biggest lobbyists is the NRA, the National Rifle Association. And we know there's lobbyists there for the trucking union. There's lobbyists there for the automobile manufacturers. So let's start with Robert. Robert, if you could explain why you think lobbying, or how lobbying works in the US, what it's about, based on what I've just said.
I think you just have to look at how much money is spent on lobbying. And there has to be a reason for that. And that is, there are results. And it's almost like cronyism. I mean, they're really working with seeing these congressmen every day. And it's a good thing if it's a lobby that you believe in. National Democratic Alliance has already started lobbying. So we need to continue that and make it grow, which also takes resources. So, yeah, so I don't know much about the NRA or the trucking industry, but I do know that they're...
Well, no, my point was, even they require lobbying to get their needs fulfilled. That's what I meant as far as...
Right. So it's a necessary part of the political system and getting things done in the U.S. government. If you want, to be heard right there in the center of the government, then that's the way to do it, with lobbying.
And regardless of whether, what side you think on, but a simple thing like oil company lobbying will do everything they can to go against electric cars, for example. And I'm not supporting one way or the other. Just my point is, oil companies, because it's in their interest for them to sell oil, so they don't want electric cars. Just a simple thing. So if it's in Armenia's interest for our borders to be protected, we have to have our lobbying. That was the example I gave with auto unions, whatever. Just that is what you have to do to get what you want. And for better or for worse, I'm not saying it's an ideal system. That is how it works in the U.S. And often lobbyists have greater influence on congressmen than their own constituents.
Right.
Martin, if you could follow up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what you were referring to earlier was AIPAC, the Jewish lobbying group. And we right now, the Democratic Alliance, we have the Livingston Group working for us. And the Livingston Group is a strong lobbying firm. Initially, there was a bit of criticism that, oh, well, look, why are they hiring the Livingston Group when Livingston, had these, anti-Armenian sentiments, et cetera, and, the fact of the matter is that's not the case. That's the other thing. In the Armenian diaspora, we have a lot of misconceptions, and I firmly believe that a lot of people in the diaspora still believe that, oh, well, if we don't have Russia, the Turks are going to eat us alive, and this sentiment unfortunately is not going away. Even though if all you have to do is just look at recent history to see that Russia has only betrayed us constantly.
Right, and that's something that I wanted to go back to. Just mention specifically what happened when Armenia was attacked, and Armenia, the Armenian government is a member in the NATO of Russia. They're
right.
NATO light.
CSTO, yeah.
Yeah, CSTO. And that means that if Armenia is attacked, if Armenian territory is attacked, all of the other countries in the membership will defend Armenia. Well, none of that happened. And even though Armenia requested it. So this is why we're talking about Russia in this way, especially, of course, for other reasons. All the corruption, Putin himself, need I say more?
Right, and Pashinyan is, he's trying to play this, tightrope game. It's like he, oh well, we have these pro-Western sentiments, but yet we're part of these alliances with Russia. And Gokor, if you can kind of elaborate, Pashinyan was recently elected chairman.
Well, a couple of things on the CSTO that I want to touch on lightly. Of course, when it was the war in Artsakh, and for years they taught us, oh, Artsakh should be independent, it should be independent, and many of our compatriots fell for that hook, line, and sinker, which led to Putin saying, well, Artsakh is not part of Armenia. You yourself haven't accepted it, so we can't protect it. However, shortly thereafter, when they invaded sovereign Armenian territory, right. Not that Artsakh is not, but if we're going de jure, sovereign territory, they still did not come in. And I'm talking about the attacks in Jermuk. And yes, Pashinyan, so as of January 1st, he's the head of the CSTO. It goes on if I'm not mistaken, it goes on a cyclical. So every year it's a different representative. So 2024, it's the year of the dragon, and it's the year of Pashinyan, apparently. But for when the CSTO didn't come in, they said we have to leave, and this is the one thing they got into people's heads. Many Armenians I spoke to, they said, "Oh, it's not that easy. It's complicated. There's no reason to do it to leave the CSTO." But you ask them, "How is it complicated? Why should we wait?" Of course, there's no answer. And by the way, you don't leave; you just relinquish your membership. Relinquishing your membership is no different than relinquishing your membership at a gym. Now, at CSTO, if you're doing it whimsically, there is a process which takes 90 or 120 days. However, if you're doing it because one end of the bargain was not fulfilled, which is blatantly obvious after the end of Jermuk, you can do it within minutes. Number two. Number three, let's say we did it without going by the book. So what? What are they going to do? Ara Papian has said many times, who knows much more of this in much more detail than the three of us combined times 100. He said, we can relinquish our membership and the very next day ask to be allied with the US. As far as those naysayers, unfortunately, Armenian-Americans who are still brainwashed by the Russian propaganda say, well, how do we know America won't stab us in the back? What are we to gain from America? What has America done? And then we have to explain to them that the US is not your ally. Quite the contrary. You're an ally of the enemy of the US. So the US has absolutely zero obligation to help you. What they're doing right now is partially out of the kindness of their heart, but I don't want to make the US sound like saints, but more importantly, because it is in the US interest to not allow Armenia to be sucked up by either Turkey or Russia, because that is in direct conflict with the US wants. And we can get into detail there, because if that happens, then China has an easier land route into Europe and several other issues. So we are so fortunate that at this historic time, our interests are in direct connection with that of the US. 40, 50 years ago, that was not the case. 40, 50 years ago, the US might have turned a blind eye to Armenia because they needed Turkey much more. It was the Cold War and so forth. Right now, our interests are in unison. The other thing I wanted to touch on, getting back to the lobbying, we've been fortunate with the Livingston Group to hire them on literally pennies on the dollar, what it would cost. Part of it is because our direct contact, the consultant, Elias Gerasulis, is of Greek origin, so he has sort of a personal stake. The other part is that Bob Livingston himself and some of the upper senior people, they are, for lack of a better word, Reagan-era Republicans who were very anti-Soviet, anti-Russia, anti-Bolshevism. So because NDA was successful in portraying themselves as the same, they are looking to help us. It's not so much about the genocide recognition. And to also add on to what Martin said, that a lot of people complained about Livingston Group because 20 years ago, they were hired by Azerbaijan and Turkey as a lobbying group. What I think we all need to understand is that the Livingston Group is, or any lobbying firm, is a hired gun. Yes. OJ, Johnny Cochran, a lot of Americans will remember, got off OJ. If I murdered somebody, I'd hire Johnny Cochran as well. So this is the same kind of thing. You hire who's good out there. They don't really have any allegiance. You hire a good lawyer. You hire a good dentist. You don't not go to a dentist because that dentist fixed the teeth of a Turk 2 weeks before that. You go to that dentist because he knows what he's doing. This is a similar situation. Add on to that, the Livingston Group are fulfilling their duties, as I said, for pennies on the dollar at a dirt cheap rate, makes it all that much more important and all that much more interesting that they are on our side. So it's not only that they're a hired gun, they have a vested interest in the National Democratic Alliance. They want another corner of the globe to share the same values as the United States does, not to have the values of the Eastern nations. One of the council members, I forgot who, said how, in the Eastern cultures, whether it's Russia or Central Asia, it's it's considered cool to trick your neighbor, to swindle somebody. Whereas in the US, not that there's no swindlers here, but it's an embarrassment. And if they get caught, whether it's a politician or anybody else, they are dealt with accordingly. And that is what we have to step away from. The idea of the thug in the neighborhood being the person to look up to, as opposed to the intellectual. The having the dignity to do the right thing, as opposed to swindle your neighbor. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We have less than 10 minutes left. So I also want to touch on, so on January 5th, on Friday, with Los Angeles time, the National Democratic Alliance will be holding a telethon from 6 p.m. Los Angeles time until midnight. That'll be in the East Coast, 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. And in Armenia, it'll be 6 a.m. to noon. They have this Friday, yeah. January 5th, January 5th, Christmas Eve, for us Armenians. And I ask that listeners contribute to whatever they can, realize that all the different so-called opposition groups all came and went. Even though the ones that were in Republic Square shouting and screaming their heads off. And I think the Armenian people, I'm fairly convinced the Armenian people have realized that neither the ARF, nor Robert Kocharian, nor Serd Sarkisyan, nor Vanetsyan, nor Vazgen Manukyan, none of these dinosaurs are in fact opposition. They are part of the same game. Russia is an interesting thing. Russia has not contributed to mankind a single thing. Varujan Avedisyan very rightly says they can't even manufacture a washing machine. But what they are extremely successful in manufacturing is deception and deceptive propaganda. They are still at the top of the charts over there. And they have been able, by using different people from different areas, different organizations, different tactics, even if the tactic implied bad-mouthing themselves, to promote what they do. That is why we've seen the likes of Chibukchan and Shirinyan and Babajanyan and Khizmalyan and the sociologist Garen Sarkisyan and on and on. And the way I tell all my friends, the one way to check who that person is you ask them, is Artsakh an integral part of Armenia? Unless the answer is a definite yes, that person is either just naive, or if he's not an average citizen, if he's a politician, then he's on the wrong side of history. The second question you ask is, do you believe Armenia should be the successor state of our 1918 republic? And unless it's a hard yes, if there's ifs and buts and this and that, then it's questionable. And that is the one thing that all these other opposition groups have not maintained. Only the National Democratic Alliance, and of course, some individuals have. The problem we're facing now is that because the Armenian public has been deceived for so long and so much, they are very hesitant in putting they like what the National Democratic Alliance says, but they are not willing to go all in and be supportive. So that is why I ask I ask also the viewers, just take a little time and look at the background of these individuals, the council members. You will see that none of them have any corruption in their history. They have clean records. What they have said, they have done. What they have said is something that every Armenian inside their heart wants. What every Armenian at New Year's Eve, when they toast, they want. The ones that mock, Ararat will be ours, or why not? Why just Wilsonian Armenia? Why not C2C Armenia? The ones that mock are either those KGB agents being hard at work, or they have been so demoralized over the year that they've put their hands up and given up. So I won't take up more time. If each of you can have like a 90-second wrap up. Robert, we'll start with you.
All I can say is what I said at the beginning, really. Just try to learn as much as you can about Armenia. Go visit. It's fun. You can have fun, but also get to know the people and their problems. And then National Democratic Alliance is in Freedom Square, right behind the Opera House. You can go there every day and talk to them there.
Thank you for adding that. Yeah.
Yeah. And also you can go to this telethon, watch the telethon, and also help with the resources.
Thank you, Robert. Martin, John?
In summary, I just want to say that, a lot of us in the diaspora feel demoralized, feel defeated, especially after, what's been happening the past 3 years. But I just want to remind everybody that nothing is impossible. Growing up in the 1970s and 80s, who would have thought the Soviet Union would collapse? Nobody thought the Soviet Union would collapse. It was the strong empire as far as everyone was concerned, but it did collapse. So nothing is impossible. Today we have the National Democratic Alliance, and that alliance needs our support because they are doing what we all aspire. So again, I just want to encourage everybody to participate in the telethon this Friday and make a donation, regardless of how large or how small it may be. Every little bit counts. So again, just we just have to be strong and never never say it's impossible. Nothing is impossible.
Thank you, Marjan. And just to add to that, when you said we are demoralized, the defeat, even though it was a treasonous defeat, we weren't defeated by the enemy. We were defeated by our internal enemy. Just a small anecdotal thing from my personal life. I wrestled in high school and college, and every time I lost a match, I would be upset, and that's it. So my coach would say, "So that's it? Are you not coming back? Or are you going to come to practice, work out, and make sure you win the next match?" So this is the same thing. So we can throw up our hands in the air, but then if we throw up our hands in the air, what do? Are we no longer Armenian? Do we just believe that we've given up Armenianism, our homeland, our ancestral homeland, our relatives, our forefathers, and everything? Or do we try to build up and come back to where we were and then much more? It can always be done. This isn't just a fantasy, this is reality. Whether it's a kid wrestling in high school or the nation of Armenia. That was that. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll do this again soon. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.